Ali, this is a really big week, right? It's a really big deal. Databricks, like maybe it's not a household name to lots of people. You would argue this is the biggest AI conference in terms of attendance and like energy in the world. And we'll go into all the nitty gritty of what you're announcing, what people will be discussing there. I want to start with this kind of like mile high big picture. And that's your argument that AGI is already here. Intelligence is not the constraint. What is the constraint?
It's the context. These AIs are plenty smart. Anyone who's interacted with them, if you just ask a big audience, how many of you think this is super smart, smarter than many of the people you work with or have around you most of the time, all the hands go up in different crowds. But then yet we're not seeing them in the workplace. They're not everywhere. We don't have hundreds of agents working together doing work for you, and we're all managing thousands of agents. That's just not reality. Why is that? They just don't have the context. If you could take all the data, all the processes, everything that people are thinking, and put them in the models, they could actually help us tremendously. But there's a big gap there. So we really want to infuse that context into the existing AIs. And when you do that, magic happens. This is why we launched Genie Ontology. That's exactly what it tries to do.
Right. The idea of an enterprise ontology, you just said it, you hear people in industry and in the culture use that term. What is it? Why is it important?
Yeah, it's actually kind of, it might be a confusing term. What it is that it's sort of a big web of all the knowledge and how the knowledge is interconnected. So it could be this person opened this document. This document was read by these other people. This document is about this particular information, and tagging and explanations of what that is and what the key elements of that document is. And that, not just for that document, but for everyone in the organization and everything that they're doing, okay? A lot of that information actually already exists. It's just not infused into the AI. So what the agents today do is they try to live go one by one and try to find it. So that's what the current agents do. My analogy is it's sort of like when Google invented the 10 blue links. Imagine instead of giving you the 10 blue links, it would go and search like one website, read it, and then find another link, read it, and so on. That would have taken forever. You would have, cost you a lot of money, and it wouldn't have been very good. That's how the agents are doing it today. So ontology is essentially like that index that Google had, but for the enterprise, and computing it behind the scenes. And then live, when you're asking questions or you're having the agent do things for you, it can tap into that index.
Everybody has an agent, or maybe they package it as an AI assistant. I think a really simple place to start is what is different about Genie 1?
Yeah, so the big difference between Genie 1 is that Genie 1 computes, other agents recite. So maybe the best way to ask or explain this is with an example. I can ask it, and I ask it all the time, who are the new customers on the platform last 24 hours? Or which of our biggest customers churned in the last 10 days? What other agents will do is that they recite. They will try to find, is there a document that has this answer? Let's search through it very quickly. And then they will try to give you that answer. But what if that answer does not exist in any document? And you have to actually compute it live. You need numeracy for that. And you need to understand the data. So that's what's different by Genie 1. So it can do that, and it can do that really fast because it uses that ontology. This is what Novo Nordisk uses Genie 1 for. So Novo Nordisk have actually empowered their scientists to use this. Before, it took them a very long time when they ran different experiments, and they wanted to know, how is this obesity study going? How is this drug affecting the different, control groups, and what are we seeing in the results? But now, Genie 1 computes that. It's not trying to recite it because that result doesn't exist. It computes it live, and it's able to do that in a fraction of the time than they did before. So, that's what they use. And, a lot of people know about Novo Nordisk maybe from the drug that many of us are familiar with, which is Ozempic. So that's just one example of what it can do.
You're making a bigger claim here than just sort of product launches, right? And I think it's that those systems that were built for human use, software that was built for humans, don't work as well as systems that are built. We're talking about the plumbing, the architecture, the infrastructure built for agents to use the software. You and I got into this a couple of weeks ago, right? That brings us to LTAP. What are you trying to say needs to be rebuilt here?
Yeah. So what's happening, and you kind of nailed it, which is the cost of creating software is almost going to zero. anyone can create software anywhere right now. But the problem with that is every piece of software that you're creating needs a database behind the scenes. That's just how software works. That's why we have these big database companies. But these databases were actually created for humans. Agents are different. Agents want to move very fast. They experiment. Sometimes they break the database. They create maybe thousands of databases. You don't want to pay thousands of, for thousands of databases. And also, they want to move fast. So they don't want to sit and wait 20 minutes. They would slow them down significantly. So that's what Lake-based exactly is. And it really helps them do that so that now they can actually operate fast on that database where all the information is stored. Now, if they want to ask more complicated questions, like a data science question of the data, they have to use a different database today. That's called, a data warehouse in the industry. So now there's like two separate systems in the industry to do that. So LakeTap brings those two together. We basically have unified them into one database that's really fit for agents. Now agents can operate on the database and they can ask these kind of AI-like questions, like, what do we think, the curve looks like for this? So that's game changer, and my favorite example is Prada. We all know that brand. They store all their KPIs inside of the LTAP Lake base, and then their agents can move very quickly and make any of these KPIs available to the leadership of the company, and it's sort of game changers. So it lets them do things much faster with much higher accuracy and lower cost.
I appreciate the product case study, but we started this conversation with you being honest that actually there are not agents everywhere in the real world. With that in mind, what is the biggest constraint on Databricks' growth as a company then? Like, what's getting in the way of deployment?
Yeah, it's, when you're taking all this data, you're creating this graph that I said, well, that involves, organizations have to, make sure that we get security approvals. We're getting that. We're very trusted. We've been doing this for 15 years, but security teams need to look through this, right? Legal teams need to look through this. AI adoption, using it for really critical use cases, it's just working its way through these organizations, them getting comfortable using this stuff, understanding this stuff. So that's really what's happening in the industry right now. I would say as a result, as I started at the beginning of the conversation, I think that most of the industry usage of AI as a whole mostly is as a chatbot. That's approved in most organizations. But using it for really critical infrastructure, like financial reporting where you're getting KPIs, or, you're developing a drug and you want that to actually accurately help you with that, it just takes longer time to get to those use cases. So that's what we're working through. But, it's accelerated our growth. So we're growing faster than ever before thanks to these.
From the outside, capital doesn't appear to be a constraint on you, right? There's reports that you're raising money, a new round, valuing the company up to $175 billion. What would be the rationale to raise new capital, therefore? Why?
Well, first of all, we've not said that we're doing any fundraise. I know that there's, rumors about this, but we're always talking to investors. Why? Well, we're investing heavily into these new product categories. We just launching a completely new product for us that's called Customer Lake, which is in the area of marketing. So we're, targeting marketing folks, which is not an area where we used to be active. 2 months ago, we launched a security product called Lake Watch, and we're getting into the security space. It takes resources to get into these spaces. And all of these products that I mentioned, we're building it agentic first. So it's like they start with agents from the ground up. We're not bolting it on. That requires that you have AI researchers. As we all know, AI researchers, don't come cheap. So all this requires funding. So we're always in talk with investors, to be able to just be aggressive and expand and launch new products, do research, go to more regions, be available in every part of the world. So that's why we require capital.
Ali, let's end it here. Earlier this month, you told me, Databricks in the end will be a public company. You want to be a public company, but that you think this is just a terrible year to go public. Do you stand by that? Has anything changed in your mind in the last 2 weeks?
No, I think that it's just there's 3 mega IPOs that have been rumored. One of them happened. So letting those kind of go through the system and see how that sort of plays out and things stabilize a little bit. And I think that getting a little bit further in this sort of AI revolution that we're going through. I prefer for the company to go public when waters are a little bit more calm and there's a little bit more predictability. So I stand by what I said. I think for most other companies, it's probably best to wait it out. And that's also what CEOs that I know tell me that have thinking about the IPO. They're saying, I don't want to, go between, 2 mega IPOs like that.
Ali Ghodsi, CEO of Databricks, this week hosting what you would say is biggest AI conference in the world. Best of luck with it. Thanks for being back on Bloomberg Tech.